Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Inclusive Arts Disability Legislation page. These slides were also originally developed by Cody Tellerico and Brian Wojcik with the Nebraska Department of Education and have since been modified by myself. Starting off with our quote, of course, students with disabilities are capable of great things, particularly if great things are expected of them. Sarah Michelle Gellar. Sarah is an actress, and this quote is just a great reminder not to set others' limits for them. We will discuss multiple topics within this presentation, so here's the table of contents that you can reference for easy access. The topics include learning about the legal framework, legal obligations for you as an educator, 504 plans, IEPs, considerations, next steps, and references. Starting off, we will discuss the legal framework for working with students of all abilities. So for the legal framework, here's a brief overview of the three main federal laws that protect students with disabilities. The pyramid design is meant to demonstrate that a large population fall under the bottom levels and it gets more narrow towards the top. But we'll start on the bottom here. So Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, on the bottom of the pyramid is to promote no discrimination against disabilities in public spaces. And as we move up the pyramid to Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, this section narrows it down to no discrimination according to the age and setting. This section is what established 504 plans, and the Office of Civil Rights maintains these laws. But as we move up the pyramid to Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, this is the federal law that is designed for children ages birth to 21 that meet specific eligibility requirements. And within this section is where IEPs fall into. Finally, the top of our pyramid is Title 92, Nebraska Administrative Code, Chapter 51, or more commonly known as Nebraska's Rule 51. These are state-specific regulations that fall under the umbrella of IDEA that establish IEPs in the state of Nebraska. Today, for clarity, we will primarily be focusing on 504 plans and IEPs. Moving on to what your legal obligations are as an arts or just general educator are. So following that same framework of the pyramid we just discussed, you as an educator of a student with disabilities or unique needs are a valuable team member and you're legally obligated to adhere to their plans. All staff working with students with disabilities should have access to or be provided copies of their 504 plans and IEPs and be aware of their responsibilities during the time the student is in your class. The Nebraska Department of Education states that if you haven't read the plan, you can't implement it. Please recall the FERPA standards to maintain student confidentiality and also be sure to communicate with your case manager if you have any questions or concerns regarding your student's 504 or IEP plans. Also, you're legally obligated to attend IEP meetings if you are requested or desire to. So here are some sample questions that have been created by the NDE that are common and that you may ask students 504 coordinators or case managers about. So just some sample ones are, can I have access to a printed copy of the 504 plans and IEPs for each student in my class this quarter? Or how does our online student information system indicate that a student has a 504 plan or IEP? Once I know a student has a plan, what are the steps to navigating the paperwork? And can I please be invited to blank's name 504 plan or IEP meeting and be included in the team communication? Or I have some questions about student's name XYZ. about their accommodations, modifications, behavior plan. When can we meet and problem solve? So these are all great questions to speak with the 504 coordinator and case manager about. Here's some other specific questions that may be more appropriate to ask a behavioral specialist, if available, or a district command union representative. So a question to ask the behavioral specialist is, I see that so-and-so has a behavior intervention plan, but I'm having trouble discerning exactly what I should be doing to proactively prevent them from escalating and how to respond to incidents or these behaviors. Can you summarize this info for me? So that's something that you can ask, ideally, a behavioral specialist, but if your school doesn't have one available, you can also ask that to the case manager. And as far as asking a union representative or district command, you can speak to them about what are my rights as a teacher working with students with disabilities. But moving on, let's learn more about the specifics of 504 plans. So this definition comes from the NDE, which defines 504 plans as a written legal plan that ensures equal access to the learning environment and general education curriculum for students who have a disability by documenting reasonable accommodations, supports, and/or auxiliary aids to provide a free, appropriate public education, or FAPE. You are not the one to determine who is eligible and who is not for 504 plans, but here are just some general guidelines that students may experience to have a 504 plan. So typically they have a physical or mental impairment, such as diabetes, asthma, ADHD, etc. Or they might have some sort of major life activity limitation related to learning or communicating, walking, things like that. So if you've provided a copy of a student's 504 plan, the accommodation section is really useful and important for you to review, which is highlighted in the screenshot here. But moving on to individualized education plans or IEPs. So the NDE defines IEPs as a written legal plan for a child with a disability that describes his or her unique educational program, is developed, revised, and implemented in accordance with the special education laws, and the details the special education and related services the child will receive in order to participate in a free appropriate public education, or FAPE, and make meaningful educational progress. This definition will also be linked in the resources section as well. Moving on to eligibility and specially designed instruction. Again, you are not the one to determine who is eligible, but students with IEPs need to fall into at least one of 13 disability categories, including autism, deafblindness, etc. And they must have a requirement to receive specially designed instruction, or SDI, which is defined as adopting as appropriate the content, methodology, and/or delivery of instruction to address the unique needs of the child that result from the child's disability and to ensure access to the general curriculum so that he or she can meet they can meet the educational standards within jurisdiction of the public school district that apply to all children. So this again will be more outlined in the Rule 51 handbook that is linked on the resources. But again, just things to keep in mind when working with students with IEPs. But going on from that, here's a short list of the most relevant sections of an IEP to review as an arts educator such as yourself, such as academic achievement and functional performance, their program modifications and accommodations, general goals, and their behavior intervention plan. But we'll look at all of these more in detail in the following slides. So here's an example of a student's present level in school and how they are doing in different areas. So this screenshot highlights where you can find the student's academic achievement and overall functional performance on their IEP. Moving on to modifications and accommodations. Highlighted here is program modifications and accommodations for the IEP. And so you will be able to see the students' corresponding ones that are more specific for them. IEPs also involve goal setting each year for students. Here are a list of common goal areas that they might encounter, such as reading, math, writing, behavior, and communication. You may think none of those categories really have to do with the arts, but we'll go over example of art accommodations and modifications for these specific areas. Also attached is a highlighted screenshot of where you could find the measurable annual goals on a student's IEP. So some students may require a BIP or behavior intervention plan. These are made up of the following components, which I'll go over here soon. But say, for example, a student has a behavior such as participating in biting themselves when they get really upset. Well, the BIP outlines different strategies to help reduce and replace this behavior. So, first, the intervention plan defines the problem behavior, which is the clear description of the problem behavior. So, say that would be the student biting themselves. And then you add the replacement behavior. So this is some sort of acceptable behavior the intervention plan is teaching the child. So instead of biting your arm, you could bite this chewy instead. Also, the setting event interventions. These are things that happen outside of the immediate routine that usually make the problem behavior worse. Like maybe the kid's just not getting any sleep at home or is really hungry or XYZ. These interventions decrease the likelihood of the problem behavior. So this is where you can really work together as a team here to figure out what's going on outside of this. The antecedent interventions are strategies and interventions that prevent the problem behavior. So this is like maybe implementing some regulation strategies so that the student is not so tempted to bite themselves. And then also teaching and behavior interventions. These, again, are intervention strategies to teach or the replacement behavior. So how are you going to get the kid to get the chewy instead of their arm or XYZ? And finally, consequence strategies. This is the plan to reinforce replacement behavior. So, different methods for this would say positive reinforcement in this example of, you get extra like a little prize or high five or XYZ to really reinforce that positive behavior. So again, just an example, but this is what a student's behavior intervention plan or BIP might look like in the screenshot of the a blank IEP here. But moving on, here are a few accommodations or just general mindsets to consider when implementing students' unique plans. So kind of tying it back to those goal areas we talked about. So those goal areas 100% can relate to the arts. Say a student has a challenge with phonological awareness, giving them visual cues in the classroom to help with that. Or maybe they have challenges with fluency or vocab. Well, you can use a speech or recording of text to help them get the content. Maybe they really struggle with comprehension. So giving them extended time for assignments or music pieces, XYZ, or especially related to music, they might have sight word recognition um, issues, or not only music, but theater, arts in general, etc. So just making sure you explain the context generally with all vocab. Math can also relates to the art as they have difficulties with computation. For music class, maybe they can mark a line through the beats or use rhythm charts, or if they have challenges with spatial visualization, using some sort of visual cue cards, or for theater, using raised supports on the stage to know where they're at. Writing accommodations, maybe the student has a really hard time with handwriting. So using some sort of music notation sheet to help with that. Again, you can work with the team here to see if they need some sort of notation software, depending on their age and grade level. They might also have challenges with sentence or paragraph or just general essay structure. So instead of writing assignments, maybe they can explain via movement or visual symbols. As far as communication accommodations, they might have challenges with socially appropriate actions. So, kind of just highlighting what the classroom routines and expectations are for all students, or giving them reminders. Or some students might have difficulties with increasing their interaction, generally with communication. So, making sure their communication device has the appropriate art phrases or they are graded on different content. Again, the key is to work as a team here. But again, yeah, the goal areas for sure tie into the arts. But now knowing more about disability legislation, here are the next steps that you can take as an educator. So, some action steps. Your call to action as an educator is to focus on strengths. It's really, really easy to get caught up in the areas to work on for students, but really utilizing your students and your own strengths together will make a vast difference. Also, reviewing your students' plans so that you can set both yourselves and your students up for success. Because again, if you don't read the plans, you can't really implement them. Also, utilizing the resources available to you, such as this course, the additional resources that are linked, local materials, etc. And being sure to communicate with team members and collaborate as everybody's in it together to um, give the student the best learning experience that they can. But thank you so much for listening to the Inclusive Arts Disability Legislation page. Here are my references, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.